Well, I'm a 63-year-old, not quite 64-year-old guy that started collecting in 1971. I was a kid, minister's kid from Fort Dodge, Iowa, little 90 miles north of Des Moines. Started finding cans on the street. Really started because my best friend, I guess we were 11 at the time, my best friend's father was an international lawyer and brought a beer can back from all these places that you look at in the map when you're in the 7th grade. And I thought, wow, those are kind of cool. I want to do what he's doing. So I started a collection and put it in the garage, and my mother immediately threw them away. And then one night when our families were having dinner at this other family's house, they went in and Mr. Hamilton, Howard Hamilton, his son Ed was my best friend at the time, was showing these beer cans that he had just brought back from Singapore and Malaysia. And my mother and father finally agreed that it was okay for me to keep them as long as I cleaned them and kept them in the garage or the basement. So my collection started. I found them. We used to ride our bicycles into the woods, and Fort Dodge is a town of 29, 30,000 people. You could ride to the edge of the farm community in any direction on a bike. Well, it might take you 15 minutes or 20 minutes, but I mean, you could go find a dump or an old barn or a place to scrounge for cans pretty easily. And I did that with Ed and a couple other collectors that I had found. There were some young guys, and we built collections. At one time I had 1,800 different labels, and we found some cans in some old buildings. And I don't know what year it would have been, probably 1975 or 1976. We had a find of a bunch of cans in an old cement block factory that had long since been shuttered. I told you the story a little while ago. I threw a rock through a hole in the ceiling where a stairwell had collapsed, and it sounded like it hit a beer can, so I threw a few more rocks. It sounded like it did, so we hauled a ladder all the way across town on our bikes and crawled up there, and we found like 600 best beer cans from the Empire Brewing Company, and they were all in perfect condition, and this all happened about 90 days before the Des Moines Convention. One of the fathers packed us up in a Winnebago, and we went to Des Moines, and I traded 300 of those best cans for 300 different labels, and now I had a kind of a sneaky, decent flat top collection, and that's what I did. And 18 or 1900 cans later, I went to college and sold them to a guy from Minneapolis and was out of the collecting business for a little while. In the meantime, I was a professional tennis player, and I ended up moving to Texas after I quit being a player. I took a job at one of the fancy country clubs down here and stumbled into the apartment business in 1985. And by about 1990 or 92, I had gotten pretty good at that, and I had made enough money to be, have a little extra. And I thought, man, I might start that beer can collection again. And I started poking around, and people were buying stuff then more than they were trading. And I thought, well, this is going to work perfect for me because I don't really want to go places and spend a lot of time doing it. I just want to go to, I want to go to a site. eBay shows up, and I'm not sure when it showed up, but it propelled the hobby pretty significantly because there was a place where you could sit at your desk and you could find people from all over the world that had stuff for sale. And if they were any good as a photographer, you could kind of figure out if it was in decent shape or not. And I started collecting some cans. I met Howard Jones, was a old-time collector from here in Houston. He's since passed, was a great guy. And I stumbled across him somehow, ad in the paper or something, and went over and started buying some cone tops and some cans from him. And I amassed a collection that was significantly higher quality than what I could afford when I was a teenager, when you have no money. And I collected until one day it felt like it was really pretty simple. The cans that I wanted, in my opinion, had gotten so expensive that even I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue to pay those types of prices. And to give you an example, I was having to pay $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 for like a clipper cone top.
What year?
latter 90s, I bought a on-grade, spectacular clipper cone top from Ohio that we're all familiar with. It's one of the kind of holy grails of our hobby, from a guy named Tommy Leo, still a collector. Never met him, talked to him on the phone a few times, do a few emails back and forth, but he sold me a log cabin and a clipper and 3 or 4 cans back then that were part of my collection. And I had some other cans that were similar to that. I did a lot of business with Ted Larson, who was a big dealer at the time. Didn't know Dan Morian very well at the time. And I went to a couple of conventions and maybe a couple of shows. I have never been a real big show goer. I have a big golf habit that keeps me, the truth be told, if I had a chance to go buy one of these cans on the wall, I would probably wait till next week if I had a chance to go play golf somewhere that was interesting to me. We all have our vices. And but that collection had gotten to the point where I had quite a bit of capital invested in it, and it felt kind of like the market had peaked a little. And I sold it in 2 pieces and went and bought a lot and built a fancy house and was out of collecting for a little while, but the itch never goes away. And I started again in the 2000s, and I decided, you can see the 2 shelves that are behind me. The one on the right is the only one I had. When I started, I decided, what, I want to collect the best cans the hobby has to offer, but I'm never going to have more than 70. So if I buy one, I got to sell one when the shelf gets full. And like I had told you a little bit earlier when we were just chatting, I had a row of quarts, I had a row of cone tops, I had a row of 40s cans, 30s cans, 50s, 60s. I had a row of rare tab tops, and I wanted to get the 10 rarest small cans. I had that little Fox Deluxe 8-ounce opening instruction can for a while, and I was having, if I can't get something in a reasonable amount of time, I kind of lose interest and move on to something else that's a little different. So I sold the quartz, and at one point I had 70 really high quality, great condition cone tops and flat tops. And prices, that clipper can I bought for $4,000, which was the most expensive can I had ever bought. That felt like a real stretch at the time. I bought it back about 5 or maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. I bought it back, and it cost me more than 20. Same can, the same can. And that I sold that can when I sold that 70 cans. I sold that collection to Mr. Morian in 2021 for what most folks would consider to be a pretty big number. And yet there was no doubt in my mind that Dan was going to be able to keep some of them and run some of them through his auction. And just as even though they had felt expensive to me when I sold them, I knew that prices were going to continue to rise. And they have. So I'm sure Tommy Leo, and I don't know where he originally got that clipper, but I'm sure it was for miles less than the $4,000 I paid. And a number of, I don't know what the date was, but 15 or 20 years between those two, it went from 4 to 22. If you offered it to me today for 40 or 45, I'd buy it back again in a minute, because I know that it's going to be worth more than that, because there is a very limited number of those. Now, you're always at risk of someone finding 5 of them in a wall somewhere. But, somebody found a bunch of clipper flat tops in a bowling alley a number of years ago that were in pretty good shape. Some of them needed some dent repairs and stuff. I don't remember who found it, but, all of a sudden a can that there were very, very few. All of a sudden there were more.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens every once in a while, but not that often. But it's the pursuit. I love the pursuit. And I've met a lot of interesting cats.
Right.
Some very interesting.
Tell me about what your thoughts are with the way that you're collecting this stuff now.
When I sold my collection in 2021, I started over, and my goal was to find all the really tough on-grade labels that I had never had before. And if I put a label up there that I had before, I wanted it to have been in better shape than the one that I had prior, which was pretty hard to do because I was trying to get the best stuff in the first place. But and there are a few exceptions from can. Hey, look, I have vices like everybody else. I think the White Horse can is really, really cool. And when I sold it, I turned around and bought it back. And there's probably a half a dozen cans up there that were in my prior collection. Well, there's a Waylay can. There's a Tally Ho can. There's some cans that I just think are really cool. And I did that for a little while, and I got kind of bored with that and sold a few of those. And today I'm collecting pairs. And they're not all, the most expensive cans that you can find. Some of them are, but there are some Kruger cans up there that are just a really cool pair. I know there's a white pair with a red K-Man and a green K-Man, and those are a few $100. They're all flat tops or cone tops. For a little while before I did this, I had 3 or 4 rows of 30s cans, 3 or 4 rows of 40s cans, and 3 or 4 rows of 50s cans. I thought about collecting just opening instruction cans, and I just gravitated, and I decided, you know what? I've never seen anybody that collected pairs. So cans that have like a brother or a twin, so to speak. Now there are some cans, the New Yorkers come to mind right off the bat, that come in threesomes. I used to have the threesome of the New Yorkers. I have one now. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I don't know. It doesn't seem quite right to try to get one more and show it as a pair when you know darn well it's like the best threesome known to collections. So I may use that as trade bait for some really rare can that'll match something that I don't have. And I'm always attracted to cans that I've never had before. There are a few cans that I have had in the past that I never really had a complete understanding of their scarcity and their ultimate value. And even the guy that I sold my cans to in 1998 or 9, Keith Belcher, close friend of mine, also in the real estate business, now retired, lives in Daniel Island in South Carolina, and still collects. We talk all the time. I sold him my collection back in 1999. It had a couple cans in there that neither one of us, who we thought we were pretty smart beer can collectors with quite a bit of knowledge, but there were a couple of cans in there that were much rarer than either one of us knew. And not only did I sell them to Keith at a particular value, but he turned around and sold them to somebody else. And I don't think we ever knew that there were really only maybe 2 or 3 of that particular label known, and that they were probably 5 times as valuable as what we thought. But you know what? Somebody else has the can and has a chance to enjoy it. All those cans that I sold to Dan, the 20% that he put out into the auctions are now spread out, and other people are happy about what they've seen and what they've been able to put on their shelves. Cans are for people to enjoy. I get it. It would be cool to try to, get them all, so to speak. I know you can't. And with the prices that people have now, if you really wanted to get an on-grade collection of all of the opening instruction cans, I mean, you would literally have to have a few $1 million to be able to readily acquire them, and then you would have to have the can become available for sale. A lot of that stuff is in collections that are not going to get sold. So if that's your goal, you're going to fail, and it's not going to be that much fun. One of the reasons I only have 70 cans on my original shelf, now I have 140, but I don't have 140 because I space them out, as you can see, is that it gives me room to have what I want without feeling like I'm failing because I can't get them all, because you never get them all. There are a few labels out there that are unknown in on-grade condition. I used to have one of them. It was a Stein's Canadian Ale, and the only one ever known in can form was like grade 2 minus, and I had it. It was in my collection. Gene Judd had it for a while. Dan, I bought it from Dan. Somebody else has got it now. I hope he's a Stein's collector. He'd probably never give it up because it's the only one, and then nobody's ever even found a dumper, which is strange. There's a bottle. I've seen a bottle with that label on it. Rochester, I think it was Rochester, New York. It's the only one known. And it was consumed by somebody, because you can look at the can and see that it was filled and somebody drank it.
I thought Rosalie was also like that,
but the Rosalie can, I'm not totally certain who owns the one that we know that is on grade and perfect. The Tiger might be in Ohio, but there are dumper Rosalies, and I don't know, maybe a half a dozen of them. The Tiger, as far as I know, is a unique can. There's a Royal cone top that I believe was originally meant to be sold outside of the U.S., even though it's a U.S. can. My friend Keith Belcher used to own it. I think it's in a California collection now. I don't know the name of the person that has it, but I've only ever seen or heard of that one unique can. There's a bunch of quarts. There's several. If I go pull out the book, I can point them out to you, but that there's only one known. And whether it was ever filled or not, I don't know. I never had a problem with a rolled can. All cans were rolled. They go to the factory, it's a sheet, they roll them up, they put a lid on them, and they either put beer in it or they put it on a display, or maybe some cans were never filled. Put a lid on it, it's a beer can. The other people are very particular about that. I don't like them if you roll them and they come out, the wrong height, or they don't look right or something. But if it was rolled or done well, it's never bothered me. A lot of people want something that somebody drank on some Saturday afternoon. It's a fascinating hobby, because what used to be a 20-cent can of beer in 1935, could be sitting on somebody's shelf and be worth $40,000 now. And I actually think values will, over time, I think they will continue to rise as more and more people realize that stamps and Barry Bonds rookie cards and things like that have gotten, very, very valuable. And as businessmen age and make money, and a lot of them will end up with, plenty of expendable income, and they'll, who knows if you'll end up being a stamp collector, a baseball collector, or a beer can collector. The number of people in the hobby is probably not growing tremendously, but I think there's a lot of people that are collecting craft brew cans, because a lot of those labels are really cool. Mm-hmm. And there's thousands of them. Okay. I actually thought about switching to craft brew cans. And then I thought, well, I'll have more than 70 or 140 of those so fast my head would spin. I could cover the walls in this office and not have, a tenth of what's out there. And I don't know very much about them, but I know that they make commemorative labels for anything, Father's Day in Boise, probably got a beer can that came out for it, Some of those are probably pretty rare. If it could, aluminum cans can get destroyed, nothing flat. At least these old ones here are durable. You're not going to smash one of those on your forehead. You'd hurt yourself. You'd end up with stitches. But, if you zoom in on those two Gunther cans on the left shelf in the bottom right, the Gunther beer can came to me today. I bought it Monday on a tip from an Arizona collector who I know quite well, who doesn't collect those. He has as good a cone top collection as anyone in the country has, and he collects Bach cans. And he saw this one and said, man, this isn't for me, but I know a guy that would be real interested in this. And he called me, and I instantly said, yeah. In my pairs, strategy now. It sits next to the Gunther Ale that I acquired a little while back because it was a very rare can that I had never had before. And I just bought it in an auction. Paid big bucks for it, I'll be the first to admit. But, I get to have it for a while. Somebody else was bidding with me all the way to the top. Otherwise, I would have got it for a lot less. And to have the matching pair, to me, might even increase the value of those two. But they're both in, the beer can is in spot-on condition. It looks like it just fell out of the truck yesterday. And the seller of that can was an old-time friend of mine. He had one of the top collections in the United States for a long, long time, and I didn't even know he had any more cans. Turns out he had 4. And he sold me one of them. And I got to do the deal and talk to my old friend on the phone for a good 30 minutes on Monday. So that one's a new one for me, and it makes for a really cool pair. I have some interesting cans over there that really don't have a pair. Once you own a Clipper flat top, there is only one label. There's 2 different brewing, there's a Los Angeles can and a San Francisco can, I believe, but the labels are identical. So putting 2 of them up that look absolutely identical doesn't do it for me. I'm not a variation collector. But and there's a finer flavor over there that I was fortunate enough to acquire a couple of years ago that, to the best of my knowledge and other collectors I've spoken with, is unique. It's the only one known. But there are other finer flavor cans that are pretty rare, and hopefully one day I'll be able to find one and pair it with that one. Well, I still think this can is unique. I've never seen this label before. There's a similar label that's white, but when you start examining it, the construction of the label is totally different. It's not like this can was the white one and they just forgot to put the white paint on. It's not even the same can. The back's different. This is a kegline can. It's probably 10 years older than the other white one. I'll get the white one. There's one in the upcoming auction. It's not a terribly expensive can. I'll make a play to see if I can buy that and pair it with this one. There are a couple of other finer flavor labels. There's an ale can. There are some from California. There's some from Seattle. The ale cans are older. The Seattle ale can is very rare, and you just don't see them very often. But this can, to the best of my knowledge, is the only one like it. And it could be that there's another one out there. You never know what's in somebody's garage. I won't keep that. I won't keep that collection more than 2, 3, 4 years, and then I'll pursue some other new angle in the hobby. And a lot of these cans will get sold or auctioned off, and everybody will have an opportunity to get 1 or 2 of them. They won't be cheap, but they will work their way around in the hobby, and to me, that's cool. I get frustrated when somebody's got all the good stuff or a lot of the good stuff, and I know that in 2050, that same guy's going to still own all that stuff. So if I want any of it, you're never going to get it. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just not a hoarder. I'll switch around, and I may even get out of the hobby for a few years, but I'll never get out completely because I've come back 6 times. There's no reason to think I won't be back a 7th. It's kind of in your blood.